Good evening and welcome to our parent chat. We're going to kick this off in just a little bit. We're almost at 5 o'clock here, but wanted to get streaming, and we're excited to have all of you joining us. All right, we're at 5 o'clock now. My name is Chad Eichhoff. I serve as Director of Admissions here at NAU. Really excited to have all of you joining us and enjoying watching on the comments on YouTube, all the different cities that you're joining from. I haven't caught a Minnesota. I'm a Minnesota native, looking for one of those, but I think we've got all the way North Carolina up to Chicago and all up and down the West Coast. And I saw Honolulu, Hawaii represented there as well too. So excited to have all of you joining us. Also excited to have my colleague Annika joining. So I'll let Annika introduce herself.
Good evening, all you amazing parents. My name is Annika Olson. I serve as the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Northern Arizona University. I've lived in Flagstaff for almost 24 years and have held various positions at the institution, from housing to the Dean of Students, but found my long-term home in enrollment management. I also have a son that's graduating this May and will be a fall 21 start. He hasn't made his final decision yet, so I certainly am a person and a parent in your shoes as well. So super excited that Chad invited me to join the call today. I will say we appreciate all the questions that came in on the survey up until just a little bit ago. We're going to try to answer all of those questions. We know that questions often create further questions, so we're also going to give you some resources and places to find more specifics for you, but some highlights that I wanted to just start right off the bat with are our backpack newsletter that's put out by our Parent and Family Services team in the Dean of Students office. And if you just go to nau.edu/backpack, you can subscribe to that. And what's included in the backpack, it's a every other week newsletter where we send important dates. Don't forget some things your students may be experiencing. We've shared a lot of information in that backpack as one of the ways we're communicating out with parents. So that is definitely a resource that I myself recently resubscribed to. So certainly a great recommendation there. There was also a question about Facebook group. Our NAU Parent and Family Services also hosts a Facebook group called NAU Parent and Family Services. So if you're a Facebook user, that's for sure something to check out. So I'm going to turn it back over to Chad to get us started on the first round of questions, I think.
Yeah, and first of all, I just want to kind of set the stage for what these parent chats are a little bit. And this is something that in the virtual space, I've absolutely loved doing. And we kicked them off last spring for our incoming class of fall 2020. Certainly, it was a unique time. I've been in higher ed and at NAU for the past 13 years, and it was certainly 2020 will go down as a very unique year. And these parent chats really helped us navigate that with families as changes happened or there were adjustments that were made. We would have parent chats and be able to talk through those. This one is more an early kind of first one to kick off the year, and we'll plan to have these throughout the year to be able to answer questions that you have. Chances are, if you have a question, there's other parents that have the same questions that you have. So this has been a good platform to be able to talk through those different things. And we did put out that survey ahead of time for questions. Certainly, I'll try to keep an eye on the YouTube chat as well. And if there's other kind of clarifications or other questions that come in, we'll touch on those. But want to kind of jump into, first of all, those questions that came in via the survey. And I kind of lumped them into some different categories. So to let you know kind of these categories that we're going to talk through. First of all, it was kind of some that fell in that COVID bucket or remote learning type thing. So that's one of the first things we'll chat about. We'll jump into, there was some housing and dining type questions, some general finance questions and cost. kind of student involvement type questions, some questions about visiting campus, and then kind of an other bucket. So our plan is to kind of jump into those and take those in those different chunks. So hopefully it's we can kind of tie up some of those questions together that came in. But to start off, I'm gonna throw it to Annika on kind of that broad kind of COVID question, what that response was, and what the fall looks like ahead.
Sure, thanks, Chad. So the COVID questions are still so much top of mind and really direct so much of what how we operate day in and day out, not only in our own lives, but certainly in campus life as well. So I know your students' lives from last spring forward look quite different in terms of extracurricular activities, sports, as well as schooling, with so many schools being virtual. I know there are some that aren't, and that's great, but so many are. So from how we operate on our campus, we've fared pretty well in the COVID environment. We've required entrance testing for all of our students living on campus. Certainly our off-campus apartments that surround campus, we didn't have direct control over that. We highly recommended students get those testing, but for all of our on-campus residents, and we have a large residential program here at the Flagstaff campus, we did require a negative test to move into the halls, and are doing the same again when students return in January. We did shift the start of our fall semester 2 weeks earlier so we could end by the Thanksgiving holiday. We also strongly suggested students get tested or exit testing. And I had the fortune of working at our walk-up testing center that was open Monday through Saturday throughout the entire fall semester. On the couple days before the Thanksgiving holiday, and students were just so wanting to get tested so they could see grandma. I heard that quote so many times. So that was great that they were taking responsibility. We also did mitigation testing. So randomly selected 2,500 students, faculty, and staff that were coming to campus. And that was on-campus students as well as off-campus students to be tested each week. And so we, if you go to the nau.edu/coronavirus, it's the big tab that's still at the top ribbon of our main page. You can scroll down and see our average positives throughout the semester. We averaged about 100 cases we were managing for students both on and off campus. So here in Flagstaff, we have about 24,000 students total, graduate and undergrad. And so we were managing some weeks under 100, some weeks just over. We had a spike shortly after Labor Day, but we're still south of 300 cases, both on and off campus. About a third of those cases, pretty consistently throughout this semester, were on campus, so 2/3 being off campus. We have given students and started giving the students back in July the option of joining their academic world in an all virtual environment through our NAU Flex technology stack, which is many different ways that students can engage remotely with faculty and staff, quite frankly. So some courses are clinicals for nursing and dental hygiene. We were unable to do those in an entirely remote environment. And so we're able to staff labs in other classroom space in a safe fashion with social distancing. Mask wearing was required on campus, as well as in public spaces and all that good stuff. So, and that included the classroom as well. We did not have classes of over 45. So any class that had over 45 students were taught remotely. But again, some of those labs are music performance. Some of those were not conducive to a virtual delivery. And so we do have about a quarter of our classes that do require an in-person component, but really fared quite well this fall. In terms of fall 21, I feel like my son asked me, well, do you think we'll be back to normal? Do you think we'll be back to normal? And if I had the COVID crystal ball, as someone mentioned in their question, I'd certainly answer that. We have a COVID info team that meets twice a week. We have a hotline that's open and staffed by our professional team. And plan to continue to do mitigation testing throughout the spring semester, and are hoping that our delivery will feel more back to normal. But we also know that some students may choose to join us remotely in the fall 21. So I can't imagine us totally abandoning that NAU Flex technology. In fact, I suspect students to have even more options as we're heading into 21 on how they want to learn virtually in the classroom or some combination thereof. For tuition and fees, students learn and select their program by our campus. So we do have an online campus. However, some of the majors and programs of study are quite different than what we offer here in Flagstaff. And some of that is access to lab space and faculty and some of our surrounding areas. We're so well known for our sustainability and environmental programs here. Excuse me, got a little nose itch. That's such a big part is being here in Flagstaff, and that really resonates with some students. So the way we charge tuition and fees is by your campus designation. So if your student applied to the Flagstaff campus as an incoming first-year student, then they'll pay the Flagstaff tuition, which, as many of you know, when for fall 21, when you start with that tuition, that'll be the same tuition you pay over the 4 years. So that's something to be aware of as well. In terms of scholarships, there's another question. I might be jumping ahead to one of the questions in finances. If your student was awarded a scholarship, that scholarship would stay with them whether they're joining us in the NAU Flex environment. If they do shift campuses to one of our 20 statewide sites or our full online campus, then that scholarship would not follow them. And the difference between Flex and online, because that's the next question that I'm sure someone's thinking, the difference is online is asynchronous. So students can access that throughout the term and complete assignments and turn in coursework and have ongoing discussion posts, but not in real time. Whereas the Flex technology allows for live interaction back and forth, either one-on-one small groups or in the classroom setting in a synchronous way. So whether some of the class are joining that 9 a.m. English 105 class in person and someone is in my hometown of San Jose, California studying, they would be in class at the same time. So that's the difference there. Chad, what did I miss on my COVID question?
There was a kind of a follow-up watching in the YouTube chat about kind of what spring going to look like for students. So even if your students coming this next fall 21, I'm sure people are curious what kind of experience a student joining us this spring is going to be having.
Yeah, you know, kind of a surprise to us in some ways, but then not so much in others, is that students really wanted to be on campus, and some students moved into the residence hall and chose to join their classes predominantly through NAU Flex virtually, but they wanted to have that on-campus residential experience. And all indications for spring is those students want to come back and continue that. So some of their classes may have been in person, maybe once or twice a week, and then the next week maybe their faculty member rotated them, or were predominantly virtual. But students, we've heard from students, they do want to be part of a campus community. Other students have the option to stay at home and learn from far away from Flagstaff. So we expected, we did have a good chunk of students that moved into our residence hall. We were at about 75% capacity in our halls across the board. And then a good portion of our students live within a half mile maybe a mile of campus, so pretty accessible. I did miss the vaccine question. Will we be a vaccination site? And we were one of the organizations in the state of Arizona that submitted to be a vaccination site. Plans are developing there, and we're hoping to offer vaccines alongside our testing center. It's in our big field house. So if you think kind of indoor soccer field, it's a big building. You're thinking in the right direction. So we're hoping to continue our mitigation testing for students and the community, as well as offer vaccinations. But that is one question. More to come. So certainly we are going to strongly encourage and encourage students in the fall too to get their flu vaccinations, and certainly we'll encourage them very strongly to get the COVID vaccination once it is available to their age bracket and needs. And our health center here on campus has always offered a whole range of vaccinations for students.
Great. I think that kind of wraps up some of the COVID side of things. NAU Flex, so that remote option for students to offer that flexibility there. So we're going to jump into more the housing and dining questions that were submitted in the survey ahead of time, and certainly keep them coming in the YouTube chat as well too, if you want clarifications or other questions come to mind. But one of the questions I want to hit first on the housing front is we were asked, how do you apply for housing, or when do you apply for housing? So nau.edu/housing, your student can log in there and apply for housing. That is one of the steps that they'll do after accepting their offer of admission. So if your student's been admitted and decides NAU is that right fit institution for them, and they're going to come to NAU, they would then accept their offer, which that's nau.edu/acceptmyoffer. And with that, then your student would pay a $250 enrollment deposit, which is confirming that they plan to attend to come to NAU. And then one of those first steps then that would open up within about 24 to 48 hours of them accepting their offer is that ability to then apply for housing. And the housing application is opened a couple months ago, but certainly plenty of housing capacity here on campus for students to be applying for housing if they've chosen to come to NAU. So that would be the step there, and there's a $100 application fee with that housing application. And then this spring, so kind of mid to late spring, there's going to be the opportunity then for the room selection component of that being opened up for students. I know there was kind of several different questions around that as far as when students are able to select their room, and really spring is when that's going to be happening for students. But certainly, yes, again, plenty of capacity, so we'll be able to have housing for your student to join us. In terms of move-in dates, move-in times, Annika, do you want to talk on that a little bit? There's some questions around that.
Sure, and I would just jump in. The earlier students apply for housing, then they would be in an earlier group for room selection. So the housing portal where your student would go in and apply for housing will be an area where they continuously revisit to do a roommate questionnaire and to maybe jointly request a roommate from the same hometown or from someone they've connected to on social media if they jointly want to request each other as roommates. So that housing portal is one that your student will schedule their move-in time for and continuously interact with throughout up to and even while they reside with us on campus. So I can use it. It's a super easy portal to use. So if I can use it, anyone can use it. But yeah, move-in date. So traditionally, we start classes on a Monday, and we are scheduled to start on Monday, August 23rd, which seems like so far away, but I know we'll be here in just a blink of an eye, or hopefully we'll be here a blink of an eye so we can put 2020 to bed here. And usually the move-in happens the Wednesday and Thursday prior to classes beginning. So we get students majority in, and if you're from out of state and are doing an orientation or have a program, if you're in band and need to be on campus early, the band director, for example, or if you're an athlete, would indicate what day you would be moving in, usually earlier than that. But for most students, it's the Wednesday or Thursday prior to the start of classes. And then we do a lumberjack experience where we have students really experiencing campuses. Some want to look for a job on campus, some want to walk and find where their classes are, some want to socialize and meet other people. We have a club and organization fair. All of those things still happened in the virtual space this year. So it is our great hope that we'll be able to do some of those things in a very safe way, but really time will tell on vaccination rollout and number of students vaccinated and all of that. So again, about 4 or 5 days before the start of classes is pretty typical. In the spring semester, students tend to either come back to ski at Snow Bowl a few days before classes begin, or show up like the night before. It just kind of depends on what their individual situation is. But that housing portal is kind of the keeper of all of that information. And housing, I will say, is also really good about emailing parents. So if your student receives an email saying, hey, Chad, it's time for you to do X, Y, and Z in the housing portal, typically they send, at least for first year students, parents an email that says, hey, we sent this email to your student. So you can give a little nudge to them. I know sometimes I need to do that with my seniors. So.
And I saw in the YouTube chat a question about what the accept my offer URL is. nau.edu/accept-my-offer was that. And it really, I guess, if I could give you just one URL to remember for the night, nau.edu/next steps. And that is going to have kind of all the different next steps types things that we're talking through, from accepting your offer, housing applications, priority enrollment, all of those types of things. So nau.edu/next steps, if I were to give you one URL to kind of work your way through that and answer kind of checklist items of things you need to do if your student chooses to be a lumberjack, which would be super excited to have them here. So there was a couple of questions that came in kind of around the idea of residential colleges. And if you have no idea what I mean by residential colleges, that's fine. I'll explain that quickly. We divided up where students live in residence halls based on their academic college. So students that are perhaps in the College of Arts and Letters are with other students from the College of Arts and Letters. And there were some questions around kind of the why behind that and reasoning for that. We used to have kind of smaller interest-based learning communities here on campus, and moving to the residential college model, and they were successful. We saw students' GPAs be higher, their persistence rates were higher with that. And then moving to the residential college model allowed us to implement some of those things more broadly across campus to all of our incoming first-year students. So that is still a plan for fall 21 to be having that residential college model. So with the housing selection piece, your students will be selecting from a couple of different residence halls based upon which academic college they're in. And really there's built-in study groups that come with that. You've got some different peer groups that you may have some classes with as well. So there's certainly some benefits to that. I do know we did pivot away from that or give options if students felt more comfortable living with a specific person due to COVID this last summer. And that's certainly something that we'll be considering as we move closer to room selection time as well. I know that was a question that was raised ahead of time in the questions survey. Anything to add?
Just that the other question, do all first year students live in the center of campus together? So no, they live by their residential college. Most of those are all first year halls. So some may be on South Campus, some tucked up on North Campus, and some in the central part of campus, again, depending on their academic college. And those colleges are large enough where they won't be seeing the same people, just that same group all the time. It really is a measure of success. Our students do very well living in this model. And you'll see a number of institutions across the country really lean into that residential college model. And as Chad mentioned, we had to ease up on that for fall 20. And I suspect we'll probably continue to make those accommodations into fall 21 as well, just in light of COVID and the need to continuously be flexible.
There were some questions also that came in about having your own room, having a private room. We were with capacity, what it was in for fall 20, we were able to accommodate some more private rooms and individual rooms. And that's something that potentially this spring will be available again in the housing application with the room selection piece that you could specify that that's something of interest to you. That's not something that we guarantee that students will be able to have their own room, but that is something that we likely will select or collect interest on to be able to then see what we can accommodate on that front. Ahead of time, Annika, there was a question around the drug and alcohol policy for students living on campus, and if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. All of our first year halls are substance free. So alcohol, drugs, tobacco, all bundled up in there. And so there is a progressive discipline policy in place. When your student moves in, they're agreeing to the standards of residence, which are in the housing portal, and they should read prior to moving in and signing on the dotted line, so to speak. And those are outlined there. They're also outlined in our student code of conduct. And so the code of conduct governs all students regardless of where they live. So as a former discipline officer in the Dean of Students office, sometimes a student who would violate an alcohol policy would be charged charged for a student code of conduct violation alongside a standards of residence policy, and then would have a meeting and determine, kind of what happened. Sometimes there's multiple sources giving various sides to the story, from I just walked in, I didn't know what was happening, or my roommate did it. That's always a popular one too. But really that conduct team tries to understand what happened and then sanction students appropriately. I will say with COVID and gathering of students, we took a very hard stance with students that were violating large groups. And we actually only had a handful, thankfully. But those students were put on a temporary suspension until their meeting with a conduct officer. But typically we work on a progressive discipline educational model, because we also realize that, students are away from home for the first time and want to experience different things. And so we try to educate them. If they make those choices, there are consequences, similar to how I'm sure you have done their whole lives. But sometimes coming from a non-parent, it sometimes resonates differently. As we mentioned in the housing portal with your roommate preferences, your students have a great opportunity to really understand and share what their preferences are. If they're a night owl, if they are a morning person, if their typical best study time is midnight to 4 a.m., they probably want to align with someone that has those same habits and values. And so that's in the spring, prior to that room selection and roommate selection, where you can kind of search based on how well you matched with others. You can search for roommates and reach out and email them and, kind of have offline conversations, whether they may be a good fit. A lot of our students find roommates in that way. So just another way to make sure that hey, I have no interest in this stuff. So if you're a partier, I'm out. And students are really honest with each other when it comes to those things, we find.
I saw in the YouTube chat something I want to give some clarification to around residential colleges. If you go onto the Housing Residence Life webpage now, you will see a matrix there that shows the different halls and the different academic colleges and kind of shows what halls they can choose from. That is for fall 2020. They will be updating that matrix. It'll probably be similar, but there could be some changes to it for fall 2021. And certainly that will be updated prior to any room selection and all of that your students will be doing this spring. But just wanted to put that out there. There's a matrix there so you can kind of see how how we go about that and set that up. But that is not the fall 2021 yet. Question about the honors college and if a student that's in the honors college has to live in the honors college living and learning community. If they choose to live on campus, yes, that is the hall that they would be choosing and would be living there. There was also a question about meal plans and if you can opt out of meal plans. Meal plans are required if you are living on campus. So not an option to opt out on those if you are living on campus. And I saw the rest of my admissions team, and thank you admissions team watching, helping out in the chat there, talking about how we do not require our first year students to live on campus, but certainly highly recommend it. And in a typical year, about 90% of our first year students choose to join us on campus. And it's a great experience and great opportunity to get connected with other students. And I think with that, we'll shift to the finances section. Annika, unless you have
it's like my favorite topic. I did want to revisit because I have my senior who you guys are going to be like, oh, who is this kid? He has a number of food allergies. And so sometimes that can we opt out of the meal plan is really my student has some pretty unique challenges in terms of diet. And we do have a dietitian on campus that works with those students. And I must say, just every year, I'm consistently more and more impressed with our dining team and the offerings they offer at 25 different places to eat throughout campus. There's really so much to choose from and so many dietary needs taken into account just in normal. But if your student needs some different, has different needs, certainly the dietitian would make some recommendations from there. So I did want to make mention of that. But moving on to finances, for those of you that on that nau.edu/next steps, so is the only URL Chad wants you to know tonight. Part of that is completing your FAFSA, or your free application for federal student aid with the federal government. And although after doing it myself, it's not it's like 80 questions, but once you complete that and send it to us, we'll build your financial aid package for you. So from total cost of attendance, so beyond tuition and fees, but to transportation, miscellaneous costs, all of those things are considered to meet need. For those of you that completed the FAFSA, we're in December. So by like right before Thanksgiving, we did our first initial run of financial aid packages last week, and all of those were in the mail by Monday morning. So expect that in the mail soon. Another thing that is, if I could wave my magic wand for incoming students, is to tell them to consistently check their NAU email. That is the official communications channel by NAU, and most institutions, they establish that .edu email address. They can certainly forward it to their Google email or to another family email that you may have set up, but that's one thing you want to, kind of once a week at this point, getting in the habit of checking that, because if there's any changes or communications, they're going to go there, and many will also go hard copy home in the mail. But that's just one thing to keep in mind as well. Room, board, and meal plans. You have control over. Our different residence halls all have different rent charges. There's a few different meal plans to choose from to meet your students' needs. All of those can be found on our cost of attendance website, so nau.edu, and I think it's just cost, and you can go there. I know we have a number of people from North Carolina to Hawaii joining us tonight. So depending on if you're an out-of-state student or you're a WUI student or you're an Arizona resident, that tuition cost looks very different. So, and then when you overlay your scholarship and financial aid, that takes care of different levels of cost. So it's really best to go in and to use the cost estimator we have, or even the scholarship estimator that we have out there too. So some of that, it's so individualized. So an honors student living on campus is going to pay a different rate than a student that may live in Riley Hall, for example. So, and that some of that's based on amenities and all of those good things. I'm looking at the question set here. Outside. Go ahead.
We had the father reach out about veterans resources.
Yeah.
And, certainly, yeah. Thank you for your service. If you're watching here, and was wondering about his daughter being able to utilize the GI Bill.
Yes, we have an amazing veterans office here, and they do everything from this point, helping students and families enter the university and enroll all through their academic journey with us. We are a yellow ribbon campus and have an amazing team led by Pete Yonka over in veteran and military services. Lori Jordan is also over in our vet center on campus and employs a lot of our veterans here for us and plan amazing connections for either family members of service members or our veterans that are returning for their own education. The GI Bill and the Yellow Ribbon Program all are very nuanced and have very specific federal guidelines. So we won't go into detail here because we want to make sure you get exactly what you need. But if someone can if one of our admissions team members can either put Pete's email in the chat, that would be great. I know he'd love to get that outreach. But a really strong program that has been supported by our administration for a number of years.
And then kind of on the topic, I guess, too, of maybe something we can't necessarily get into the weeds to, but about residency and getting Arizona residency. I believe this question here was specifically a Texas resident wondering about getting Arizona residency.
Sure, because when you look at that tuition, you're like, wait, those Arizona residents pay a different rate than an out-of-state student. And that's true. That's based on, that's pretty typical for public institutions across the country. You have an in-state rate because students and families have been paying taxes in that state. So they pay a different rate than out-of-state. So that's kind of typically how it works at public institutions. Most public institutions have a way that you can become a resident of that state, and there's a number of different steps you take. The one that is always and for us, those govern all three of our state institutions and are outlined by the Arizona Board of Regents. You can find that policy on our website by just in the search doing searching for residency, and it'll direct you to the policy, which is in our policy book. But the short answer is that it seems like it should be really easy. I'm here for a year. I have a voter's registration and license that are Arizona. But for first year students, it becomes challenging because they do need to be financially independent. And so that's where usually the rub comes for first year students. But again, the whole policy is out there and has how you can establish, and it takes you through the steps.
All right, going to shift gears a bit to kind of the next section of questions, more around the student involvement. And certainly one part of student involvement, kind of the kickoff a lot of times, is new student orientation. And this last summer, we did pivot to a virtual experience for our new student orientation. This next summer, we do plan on leaning into a virtual experience again, and are dreaming up bigger and better things for that virtual experience. It is our hope that we could offer some sort of optional in-person experience right before the start of school. But there's not going to be, typically we were in May and June and doing in-person type things. It's not going to be that way. We will have a virtual experience for students to participate throughout the summer, and certainly we'll be releasing more details about that and dates around that as we move throughout the spring.
We also plan to have a parent track too. So the series of these parent chats, we also do what we affectionately call Forecast from Flagstaff, which is in the spring will be once a month, but as we get into May, June, and the summer month, a couple times a month to give you kind of the most up-to-date information that you need to know. And we started that, and it's our TV crew here on campus helps us produce that. So we were all over campus in different venues, showing the technology of NAU Flex, interviewing faculty and staff, hearing from our students, of course, of how they've changed, how the student experience has changed. So Chad and I love doing those forecasts. So you'll see some of those starting to come out in the spring as well. And then, as Chad mentioned, kind of dreaming up a bigger and better with a little more time than we had last spring orientation experience. But again, as Chad mentioned, our hope is to bring students safely back to campus and be able to have the opportunity for them to connect. Our student ambassadors, also honors ambassadors, our peer jacks, all hosted different events to connect students over the summer, from Instagram live streams and all the other streaming things that students are familiar with in social media. So made sure that students were able to make those connections.
Yep, and certainly although that students weren't setting foot on campus for orientation, like Annika says, certainly there was a connection made. I know last fall when parents were moving their students in, I'd run into them on campus, and they said they felt like they knew Annika and I from all the parent chats we did and Forecast from Flagstaff. So I know this is the first exposure for a lot of you all to us, but certainly looking forward to building that connection virtually as we head through the spring and summer, and your students joining us on campus next fall. So some of the other questions in that student involvement front, there was a couple of athletic type questions, and I know there was an athletic question I saw come by as well in the YouTube chat about men's basketball. With that, I would recommend reaching out directly to that sports, the coach, and you can find their contact info on the NAU Athletics webpage. And they're going to be the ones that are making those determinations in terms of scholarshiping and rosters for the NAU Athletic program. That being said, there are a lot of club sport opportunities, intramural sport opportunities that we provide for students, and things outside of the athletic realm. We've got over 400 clubs and organizations. NAU.edu/clubs is going to take you to a page where you can start to explore, your student can explore those long list of clubs, and likely they'll find something they're interested in, but certainly there's new clubs and organizations created every year. So as interest evolve and new interests pop up, there's always new clubs and organizations being found. I
would go back to the athletics piece too. NCAA is really strict on when coaches can correspond with athletes and parents. So if you don't hear back straight away, you can be pleasantly persistent and send another email or even leave a voicemail. They can't always return your correspondence based on some NCAA regulations. So I just did want to mention that. And I know that because Chad is our former women's basketball assistant coach. So he taught me that.
Yep. and I know there's definitely been rules with COVID too, in terms of outreach too, that have maybe even adjusted a little bit more there on the NCAA front. There's a question about marching band that came in ahead of time. If you go to the NAU marching band webpage, they've got a form there you can fill out. You can put your contact information in there, and they'll be able to reach out to you and give you all the details about being able to join in with marching band. But awesome opportunity, and they do a great job. Questions about honors college. There was a couple of those, and that's certainly part of kind of the student experience and involvement. Our students that choose to be a part of that honors college. And that is an additional application after the student has been admitted to NAU, and that application is open. And I know that they are working through those applications in the order they come in. And typically the turnaround is about 3 to 4 weeks for honors to get back to your student in terms of if they're admitted to the honors college. And Annika alluded to earlier, making sure your students checking their NAU email address. That is one of the things that would be communicated to the NAU email address. So if they applied to honors and they're wondering why they haven't heard yet, make sure that they're checking their NAU email address. Saw some questions come in the chat about studying abroad, and one came in ahead of time. And this one particularly asked about business. And I'd love to do a plug for our IGP program, our interdisciplinary global program, which a student can actually get 2 degrees over a 5-year span and spend 1 year abroad in that. So for instance, maybe they're doing a business degree and a Spanish degree and spend a year abroad in Spain, immersing themselves in the language during that time. So that's a awesome opportunity. And we were, I think, 7th in the nation, NAU was, in terms of total number of students participating in year-long study abroad opportunities. So if you look across all the different institutions, certainly that's not the case or going on right now with the COVID pandemic, but during your students' time here, hopefully there's some normalcy on that front, and they can take advantage of our many awesome study abroad opportunities. So shifting to visiting campus, and certainly there's been questions in the YouTube chat, and some came in ahead of time about what's available out there. I guess I'm going to give you a second URL to remember here, but nau.edu/virtual is a good kind of starting point for a lot of that. You can get the virtual tour experience. You can also sign up for what would be our normal on-campus campus visit presentation. We're doing that Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. and then Tuesday and Wednesday at 7 p.m. So encourage students and families to sign up for one of those to get a good overview of the institution and be able to ask questions in that setting as well. Lots of other sources on that virtual page that you can check out. But we certainly, people were asking about, can we still visit campus? Can we come to campus? You are able to still certainly come to campus. We have a self-guided tour option that is available on that nau.edu/virtual page. And you can print that out ahead of time. We also have a podcast that goes along with it that you could actually listen to at each of the stops. And our Welcome Center is open for walk-ins and to be able to answer questions and sit down in a masked, socially distanced manner and talk to one of our admissions officers to answer your questions in person. And certainly if conditions allow us to do so, we'd love to get back to more guided tours and that type of thing, but continue to assess the situation there. Annika, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I know that's a tough one. My son is deciding between 2 institutions and has been to one and then has not visited the other, but thinks it's a good fit. And so we're going to go down and do kind of the self-guided tour. And so at least he can kind of feel the campus. We're gonna try to do that when classes are back, so there's a little more activity. We ended our semester at Thanksgiving, and so we're kind of in our what feels a little less on campus, although I did have skateboarders at my window again today. A little less dense on campus, with most staffs being on some type of rotation coming to campus just to make sure we're all being super safe. So we know it's not optimal. That virtual website has a bunch of real quick videos that dig into everything from vet and military services to honors to campus life. I mean, there's probably like 30 different videos out there, kind of depending on what your interests are and what your students' interests are. So please connect with us virtually. You can schedule a one-on-one appointment with one of Chad's amazing admissions team members or us. If you want to go into more specifics, we would love that. So there are ways to connect, just not in all the ways that we're traditionally used to in searching and finding fit for colleges.
And if you want one of those kind of one-on-one appointments virtually or on the phone, admissions.appointment@nau.edu is a email address we created specifically for that request. So again, admissions.appointment@nau.edu. And then there were questions about a family weekend or a parents' weekend in the fall. Certainly a great tradition here. And I know they spun up some options for this last fall, and I would imagine would have something again for this fall. I'm not aware of dates being set yet for that, but certainly some sort of experience there.
Yeah, usually homecoming, which also happened virtually, which was actually pretty cool, as well as Parents Weekend, revolve around the football schedule, which is still up in the air too, because that's a major activity for both of those weekends. If you go to the Parent and Family Services website, they did a lumberjack cookbook as part of the virtual experience. So if you're, stumped for recipes, you can jump on there and look through that. It was just one of many activities that they did, but I thought that one was kind of unique.
Cool. We're going to jump into the last bucket. I had kind of an other bucket, I guess. We went through those other categories of questions and hit a couple of these. As far as students bringing in transfer credits, maybe they're dual enrolled and wondering how those courses would transfer. We have a cool tool called Jack's Path because we're the lumberjacks. So nau.edu/Jack's Path, and students would be able to plug in their coursework in there and see how it transfers. That's also true with AP coursework and test scores there. You could put in there and see how that would transfer into NAU.
And it also might help your student plan their spring semester, or even if they're going to continue to take some community college credit over the summer, of what to take that they can ultimately not take when they get here. All of those courses on Next Steps, you'll see priority enrollment will happen. It's happening now, but some students aren't quite ready. So in the spring is when we really want students to complete that. That's an academic profile that's different than their application. So students, I know there was a question about changing their major. They can indicate a major change on there and indicate AP or IB credit that they have, community college credit that they've taken since they applied, because we know students continue to plow through and work hard in their senior year. And so they can indicate all that on there. So the advisor who's going to build their first semester and first year classes has all that information at their fingertips. Students will also want to send us their final transcripts from both high school and those community college credits, so we can make sure those are articulated to their academic record.
And yeah, the ability to change majors, it's easy to do. Priority enrollment is going to be one of the steps on Next Steps there, where a student could put down a different major that they're interested in besides maybe what they applied initially to. Annika, I want to get your opinion on this one. It was a question that came in on the survey. What do you hear from students about their most challenging issues as a freshman at NAU, academically and socially?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a very different semester than what, when seniors were applying a year ago and accepting offers a year ago than they hadn't anticipated. And so we've really tried to understand that student experience and meet them where they are. Some students have moved through the semester, enjoyed being on campus or studying remotely. We still had our free tutoring, our career services, our resume workshops, interviewing virtually. All of those services were still very, very much available. Telecounseling, telehealth, group counseling. And I think, although I do think some students struggled, probably not unlike if you were going to take, your student senior class. Some students are finding the pivot to online and starting online, although maybe socially frustrating, not too much academically challenging or different than what they maybe experienced if they were on ground. The social component was a challenge. I will say that I feel that challenge was met well by our student affairs team. There is a group of students that help plan activities on campus. Certainly our associated students for ASNAU, it's the student body government, has been instrumental in partnering in some of those, as well as the full-time student activities and dean of student staff. Have done some wildly creative online things. We had up until just a week or two before finals, we had moved part of our rec center to an outdoor venue, so students who still wanted to work out could schedule a time and still get a weight workout in. There were a host of different things that students could connect with online. And Chad mentioned those 400 clubs and organizations. And leave it to this generation who have been are much more digitally competent than me. I'm not saying that's true of all of the parents out there, but certainly this one, to come up with some wildly creative ideas for connecting. Was it a struggle for some? Yes. Are we continually trying to get services to students that are struggling either in the classroom or out of the classroom? Yes. So it's really a partnership alongside the student, the university, as well as the parents. We understand that. We don't expect you to send them off to campus and say, all right, good. It's not our responsibility. You're a partner with us in this relationship. We understand that. We try to get you the information you need to continually coach and coach your student to be successful. Our retention for fall to spring semester looks quite good. So I'm certainly encouraged by what I'm seeing in students wanting to not only return physically to campus, but return to the classroom environment, albeit looking different than it did at the beginning of last spring.
I think that's a good spot to wrap up on, the idea that we're partners in this as an NAU admission staff, enrollment management staff, working with your student and with you to help you navigate this. And we realize that the college selection process can be a lot, and the next steps part of it can be a lot to work through as a family, but we're here to help you with that. And certainly we'll keep this conversation going on as we go throughout next spring and next summer. But it was great, and hopefully you all found this helpful. And we really appreciate you all taking your time to learn a little bit more about NAU and how we can help your student. And we will continue to work with you and share that information in the time ahead. So thanks for the questions ahead of time, and look forward to connecting with you all again in the future.
Thank you.